Hey, welcome back, everyone. Good Wednesday morning to all of you, or afternoon, depending on when you're watching this. And hopefully, we're having a wonderful kind of middle of the week here. Now, we still do have a lot to talk about. We have Ernesto now very quickly approaching hurricane status as it moves towards Bermuda, as well as potentially Atlantic Canada. And we also have some stormy weather back home to talk about, with also the potential of maybe a little bit of some drier fall air trying to work on into that forecast for some of us. Going into the start of next week. So if you're new here, welcome. My name is Gerald. I am a meteorology major at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Here to give you the latest update on what and all's happening out there. If you want a tropic-centered update, come back tonight for another update, or you can watch last night's video on just the tropics specifically. Now, a couple other housekeeping things. I am moving tomorrow, so I will have a video out tomorrow morning. I probably, very likely, I'll just tell you, will not have one tomorrow night. I'll still be kind of moving things in and kind of getting things situated. But we should be good to go for Friday morning, and from there on out. And then classes start next week, so that'll kind of mess with the schedule a little bit as well. But no matter what, morning videos will continue here for the foreseeable future, so don't worry about that. Alrighty, with all that said, let's go ahead and jump on into that forecast because, again, we do have a good bit to discuss here, and we'll start with Ernesto. Here he is. Already moved through Puerto Rico. Now, I say moved through Puerto Rico. We are still seeing some pretty good rain out of this in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, but luckily, as the storm is strengthening, it is also moving away. So those impacts are not going to be super big today, but enough that you'll still notice the storm. Now, outside of there, we do have another big complex of storms right over the heartland of the country. And it's kind of a precursor to some severe weather we're going to see over the next couple of days as a trough and a cold front try to work on through the country. I don't think it's going to be an outbreak or anything by any means, but definitely enough that we're going to want to talk about it. And we definitely will do that in the video. But let's go ahead and really start by diving into Ernesto here, a strengthening tropical storm, a borderline hurricane. In fact, by the time you're watching this, if you're watching it after 11, very well it may already be a Category 1 hurricane here. North of the island of Puerto Rico. So again, we're getting pretty good ventilation out of this storm. The center of the storm is kind of right into here. So not a symmetrical storm by any means right now, but again, we are seeing bursts of convection near that center, especially kind of at the end of this loop here, indicating the storm is trying to get its act together. Also, these outer bands are quite feisty, a lot of lightning here. And dumping some torrential rain and all, luckily mostly over open ocean. But again, some of these bands are getting back down into the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. So, a bit of it's going to be a rough day for a lot of folks here, at least a rough morning and afternoon. But by this evening, things really should begin to improve as the storm moves away. Now, this is radar overlapped with our latest track from the National Hurricane Center. And again, you'll notice a lot of rain still happening here through the British Virgin Islands, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. And will continue throughout the day as the storm moves away. Now, latest forecast is for this to become a Category 1 hurricane by this afternoon, and then already up to a Category 2 hurricane by overnight tonight. So very likely to see rapid intensification out of the storm over the next 24 to 48 hours. And now the latest forecast does bring this up to a major hurricane on approach to Bermuda. This is overnight Thursday into Friday, forecasted to reach that Category 3 major hurricane status and maintain it on approach to Bermuda before hopefully weakening just a little bit as a little bit of dry air and shear may try to work into the system. But latest forecast, I think the storm is going to go either just to the west of the island of Bermuda or potentially right over it. So that's, we're starting to narrow things down a little bit here. But unfortunately for you folks in Bermuda, the forecast hasn't necessarily improved. Again, intensity has gone up. And you're still kind of right here near that center of track. So I think hurricane conditions are becoming more and more likely through the island, even if you don't necessarily see the eye pass right over you. Very likely we'll see hurricane conditions. And after that, then we got to watch Canada. Nova Scotia, you folks, is also not a forecast that has improved for you either, unfortunately. And we'll take a look at those spaghetti models, but you'll notice that cone getting dangerously close to your island. Or I say island, is Nova Scotia even technically an island? I don't think it is. Let's see here. Yeah, definitely not. Might be a river through here, but either way, through your peninsula or whatever, exact geography we have ongoing there into Nova Scotia. Newfoundland, however, though, I'm pretty sure is an island. So same for you folks as well. Could see impacts out of the storm. In fact, chances that you see impacts are increasing. And latest spaghetti models show why. So for Bermuda, I'll go ahead and circle that island as well here. This is Bermuda. You'll notice a big cluster on each side of your island here, but I think it's most likely that the storm is going to go just to your west here, kind of in this cluster. Looks to be the most likely scenario across the board through most of our models. But again, still about 72 hours away from that happening. So things are going to change a little bit here in the forecast. Now, for you folks in Canada, look at this big cluster that now brings us right into Nova Scotia and then eventually through Newfoundland as well. Yeah, it's something we're going to want to watch, and I talked about this the past couple of days. I know a lot of the models show it going out to sea, but that trough over the United States oftentimes, kind of traps the storm from getting a clean exit out, and it's looking increasingly likely this could make landfall in Canada. And it would be a feisty storm, too. Again, we could see a Category 1 storm transitioning to an extra tropical system, but it would still have hurricane strength impacts on approach there. Latest intensity forecast, not much has changed in the models. Again, a slight bump up though, and you'll notice that here, a lot of the models getting this now into Category 3 strength over the next 48 to 72 hours right before getting to Bermuda. The good news is, after Bermuda, most of the models slowly weaken the storm and then weaken it much quicker after interaction with Canada and those much cooler waters of the North Atlantic. So again, very likely we see a major hurricane, which would be the second one of the year, Beryl and then Ernesto as well. So if my math is correct here, that means 40% of the storms we've had so far would have reached major hurricane status, and 60% of them reaching hurricane status. So pretty uncommon to get a stat like that here within the first 5 storms of the year. And hopefully, again, it's not a precursor to what kind of is left to come the rest of this hurricane season. All right, latest from the National Hurricane Center on wind speed probabilities. Tropical storm force wind speeds seem all but certain for Bermuda. Also or chances are increasing for that through Nova Scotia as that track shifts up towards you folks. Even technically about a 5% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds into the coast of Maine and the Cape Cod area. But again, I think really the biggest impacts for the coast of the United States will really just be waves and rip currents. And again, those waves could be quite good. So if you're a surfer and the beach is open and safe to travel to, could be a pretty good trip for you folks. But again, unfortunately, not so fun for Bermuda, where tropical storm conditions, again, all but certain at this point, and hurricane conditions, yeah, chances are increasing for that as well. About a 30 to 40% chance right now we see hurricane conditions, and this will likely go up here throughout the next day or so as the storm gets stronger and approaches the island, and we're even more confident about that forecast track. But yeah, so not great news for everyone in Bermuda here. All right, latest forecast. Again, I will go ahead and circle the island of Bermuda. This is the GFS model. I'm going to, again, just kind of move this ahead quickly. By the time we get to this evening, again, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and the Virgin Islands, maybe some leftover showers and some rough rip currents and all, but all things considered, things really become much nicer. Now, for Bermuda, this is when things go downhill. This is Thursday into Friday. You're already going to see some rain from a frontal boundary that is kind of stalled out over you, but that's not technically Ernesto. Ernesto is still back towards your south and west and strengthening again up to that major hurricane status, very likely, and moving towards the island. So latest GFS scoots this just technically to the east of you, but you're right along that outer eye wall. So tropical storm conditions definitely would happen in this scenario. Hurricane conditions would be probable, but luckily the center of the storm is just a little bit off from the island, and then eventually it gets out of here. So again, we would see impacts from that. We would definitely have rough seas, some storm surge, heavy rainfall, and definitely gusty winds. The European model is unfortunately not any nicer to you. Again, already raining from a stalled out frontal boundary. Here comes Ernesto, strengthens into a major hurricane or close to it, and this is Friday afternoon. Again, this, I guess I could change the color so you can see it a little bit easier. Let me just do black. That'll probably show up pretty good here. Well, if I can circle the island properly. Actually, you know what I can do? Even make this smaller so we can see it even better. There we go. So the European model, this is Friday afternoon. The outer bands of a strong Category 3, probably hurricane here, Ernesto, moving in towards the island. And stays that way throughout the day and the evening, and the European brings the eye right over the island. If you could see that, I know it's super small on your screen, but the island is literally in the eye of Hurricane Ernesto in 72 hours or overnight Friday into Saturday morning on the latest European model. So obviously this would be kind of a worst case scenario for impacts. You get the front eye wall, the back eye wall, you get kind of, the strongest part of a major hurricane going into this weekend, and that would sure enough definitely bring strong wind gusts. Again, this number here is in kilometers per hour, for wind gusts on the islands. And these are max wind gusts over the lifetime of the storm, so not sustained winds, which is good. But again, already gusting pretty good because of that frontal system the next couple of days. But here comes Ernesto. And look at this, winds could be gusting up near 150, maybe stronger than that, kilometers per hour, which would be more than enough to cause problems here throughout much of the island. Now, again, this is assuming the storm goes right over the island. Now, it very well could take a track more like the GFS. Winds would gust closer to probably 100 kilometers an hour compared to 150, 160, maybe even higher than that. But again, wind concerns are becoming higher here the closer we get towards the storm, unfortunately. All right, our folks in Canada also, unfortunately, under the gun potentially. I showed you those latest spaghetti models closer to Nova Scotia than we've seen the past couple of days. Now, the latest GFS model, which has been the one bringing it into Canada, kind of flipped with the European. So now the GFS is further offshore, wouldn't really bring many impacts to the island. Again, I keep saying island. No, I know Nova Scotia is technically connected here, even though it's kind of a peninsula, but Newfoundland as well, which is an island. And New Brunswick, again, not even really seeing impacts out of this storm outside of some rough seas and maybe a couple outer bands getting into Newfoundland come Monday and Tuesday. But all things considered, it's kind of a close call, but not really seeing any impacts. Now, the latest European is unfortunately quite a different story. Here we go. This is getting into our Sunday into Monday. Here's the storm, and I know it's kind of hard to see here, but a strong hurricane, probably Category 1, Category 2 status, although again, becoming extra tropical, so whether you want to call it a hurricane or not, the impacts are the same though. And this is far enough even west, that we're even seeing some light impacts into Maine, the coast of Maine here in Cape Cod, seeing some of those way outer bands of the storm, again, as it moves inland, and it's a direct hit into the island of Nova Scotia as a very strong low pressure system here. This would bring very strong winds, heavy rain, and some flooding concerns right through the island, and then eventually moves this further up into Newfoundland. It begins to weaken the low pressure, and then gets it out of here by the time we're into Tuesday. So again, this is Sunday evening into Monday morning, Monday afternoon, Monday evening, Tuesday morning. So that's a solution we really don't want to see. And should we get, a storm track like that, impacts again would be plentiful. These are again max wind gusts through a 6-hour period, but we're seeing some, wind gusts here Monday afternoon up near 100 to 150 kilometers per hour, which is more than enough to take down some trees and would be quite an impactful storm for you folks in Canada, at least through these parts of Canada. And, not something we would want to see, and then even brings those winds up into Newfoundland. Again, quite strong here, gusting up to 100 kilometers per hour at times through much of the island. So, it would be an impactful event for sure should that occur. Now, again, the models are still in disagreement. The GFS, again, didn't even bring this inland, but, if I take it back to the spaghetti models really quickly here, again, we've got a lot of members here that do bring this inland now. So, it's a trend we're going to want to watch. It's a trend that unfortunately is looking more likely by the day here. And rainfall also would be a problem. We could see, upwards of 100 millimeters of rain. The good news is the storm's moving quickly, so it'd be kind of a quick hitting rainfall event. It wouldn't be one of those storms that stalls out and, adds hundreds and hundreds of millimeters of rainfall. But again, still would see some flooding concerns probably nonetheless. All right, so that's the latest on Ernesto. Again, we're going to have to keep watching it here for our folks in Bermuda and Canada. Also, after that, we could see some more trouble in the tropics. Make sure to come back tonight for that video where, again, I will discuss the long-range tropic outlook and kind of why we're a little more quiet outside of Ernesto and how long that will last. And I really think by the time we get towards the end of August and start of September here, things are really going to pick back up. So, little spoiler alert there. But looking at the lower 48 radar, again, we've got a bit of a mesoscale kind of convective system, or even a MCV mesoscale kind of vortex here into portions of Nebraska and South Dakota this morning. And basically, the biggest concern here is just a lot of rainfall from Iowa down through the Ozarks. Again, seeing some pretty good rainfall totals this morning. Right now, severe weather isn't a big concern with this, but we are seeing some gusty winds for sure as well, even some rain up into the Dakotas. Again, all of this is due to kind of one big area of low pressure that is going to slowly cross the country here with a cold front on the backside, and is going to bring some nicer air, definitely by the weekend for some folks, but also some stormy conditions on the front side. All right, latest watches, warnings, and advisories. Things are relatively quiet, but we do have some flooding concerns here through Missouri this morning, even some flash flood warnings up for southern sections here through the Ozarks, kind of into the West Plains area of Missouri, even down here kind of towards the Joplin area, or I guess like further east here than Joplin, and even a little further east in Springfield. But again, flooding is a concern here through these regions as this complex of rain moves on through. Now, we also have flash flood and flood watches up for really much of the central part of the state here. Again, going to see some heavy rainfall. Now, this afternoon, it is going to be hot for a lot of folks here into the south, from Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, even down into Jackson, Mississippi, Baton Rouge. Again, plenty of heat advisories and excessive heat warnings in effect for you folks. Outside of that, things are relatively quiet. Still seeing river flooding in the Carolinas from Debbie. Again, she's been gone for about a week now, but her impacts are definitely lingering here. And again, we're seeing that flooding concern because of that. Also, those kind of beige boxes you see were for some fog this morning. So kind of another sign that the seasons are changing. Fog is definitely much more common in the fall than any other season here in the eastern United States. All right, severe weather again this afternoon. We definitely could see some anywhere in this green area on your map, but especially that yellow area. Main threats will be strong straight line winds, some hail, and an isolated tornado or two, especially in the yellow area. But again, strong straight line winds the main threat today. Same story for tomorrow, but the threat shifts east and south a little bit as that low pressure moves as well and takes its cold front with it, and thus that lift and wind shear. So again, could see some strong storms tomorrow. Main threat again would be strong straight line winds, some hail, and an isolated tornado or two. And then we will do it all again on Friday through the Ohio River Valley, the Tennessee River Valley, even up through Michigan could see some strong storms. So it's going to be an active couple of days, between the tropics and this marginal risk of severe weather and slight risk of severe weather, or level kind of 1 and 2 out of 5. That is currently on the map. So again, an eventful time frame here to be watching the weather. All right, so we're going to take a look at some mesoscale models here. I say some, it's really just one. But again, before I show this to you, just know this is not a picture-perfect idea of what's going to happen, but it gives us a good gauge of the general places that will be under the threat for severe weather and the general timing that it will happen. Now, this afternoon, again, I'll take you back to that map. Again, here through the plains and into the Kansas City area are going to be the main threat area. And sure enough, we see that with this model going into Wednesday afternoon and evening. So again, any of these showers and storms could become strong to severe in these regions, with, again, straight line winds being the main threat and some large hail as well. Now, that kind of continues into the evening hours here for sure, and by the time we're waking up tomorrow morning on Thursday, a bit of a kind of mesoscale convective system could form, and we could wake up once again to another feisty line of storms that overnight tonight and tomorrow morning could bring some more strong straight line winds as it pushes off towards the south and east, and getting into Thursday afternoon, as this low pressure kind of dives out of the northern tier of the country. Here we go. Look at these storms firing up with it. Again, kind of into that threat area tomorrow from Oklahoma all the way back through Illinois, Indiana, Missouri. Again, could see some strong storms. And to the north of there, we're also going to see some storms, probably more of just a heavy rainfall threat for you folks into the UP of Michigan. I know some viewers there, even into the thumb of Michigan, Wisconsin, into Minnesota. Again, it's going to be a rainy, probably Thursday evening and overnight into our Friday. And then by the time we get into Friday afternoon and morning, again, look at more of these storms firing up in that new threat area. Again, could be quite feisty. This low pressure here, it means business. It's going to definitely throw a punch here. Again, to the north there, into even southern Canada, into the Great Lakes states, more of a flooding threat. But Detroit, all the way down through Ohio, through the Ohio River Valley, into the Tennessee River Valley Friday afternoon. Yeah, definitely going to see some strong storms pop up here with definitely a straight wind threat there. So then by the time we get into Saturday, we'll have the chance for that to eventually kind of sneak off towards the east a little bit more through the mid-Atlantic. So we'll definitely want to watch out for that. Why are we seeing all this? Well, it's this big bright area of blue. Again, a bit of a trough swinging on through. Here's where we're seeing that low pressure due to this upper level low pressure and troughing that is ongoing. and will continue to move off to the south and east and bring those severe weather impacts with it. By the time we're into this weekend, we've got a pretty nice trough setting up over the entire eastern part of the country. That's going to keep things a tad nicer. We're going to kind of limit that flow out of the Gulf here on the backside at least and bring some nicer, drier air. Now, this is Ernesto. Again, this is kind of why Ernesto in the latest European model is getting pulled up closer to Nova Scotia and even Maine a little bit. Again, interacting with this trough, it's getting pulled it's getting pulled north quicker, sorry. And thus is bringing those impacts with it further and closer to the United States and Canada. Which again, we talked about, that was a very real possibility, kind of how Hurricane Lee worked a bit a year ago, although this one won't probably be quite as strong as Lee, at least on max number wise. But that trough, again, hangs out for a while, pulls Ernesto north, and just parks itself over the east for much of this weekend into early next week. And then in the long run, it looks like some ridging might try to take back over again and heat things up. But here we go, Friday afternoon, and here is our low pressure. Again, bringing widespread rainfall through the Great Lakes and some severe weather down south from there. We're definitely going to bring some strong, feisty storms. And then even Saturday, again, getting into the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic here, could see a severe weather threat through the Carolinas, Virginia, the Delmarva, Maryland, and into Pennsylvania, maybe even New York, depending on the placement of this low pressure system. And then I think by the time we get to the start of next week, this is Sunday actually, it's going to be interesting what happens here. Again, Ernesto potentially kind of interacting with this area of troughing and low pressure over the Northeast. It's going to be interesting for sure. We'll have to watch the track here, but we can really see some enhanced rainfall threat over the northeastern United States, maybe even some gusty winds depending on how they interact. We could definitely see some dynamic things kind of happening in the atmosphere here. That's going to be a little dicey potentially. The good news, though, again, is Ernesto's moving quick. It's going to probably eventually pull that trough and rain out of the eastern half of the country, and we should clear out by next week. But again, we're going to be dodging some storms and all before then. Okay, so final thing I'll show you, dew point map. Yeah, good news, we got some nicer air on the way. This is Saturday afternoon. Again, low pressure kind of centered up in this general area. So still pulling north Gulf and Atlantic moisture into the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. But look at the backside here. We're getting definitely a defined area of not dry air per se, but drier than what it will be beforehand, that tries to work on through and dive south. And here we go. This is next Sunday into Monday. Yeah, we got some nicer dew points working south through some big cities, Knoxville, Atlanta, Charlotte. Definitely the Appalachia chain seeing some nicer weather here, and even in through the Ohio River Valley. Not out of this world dry air. In fact, what we saw earlier this week might be drier than this. But some folks that maybe didn't get in on that nicer air may get in on this as it tries to dive a little bit further south and east than the last one did, and could hang around for a little bit. Again, look at some of that dry air getting all the way down into Georgia next week, the Carolinas, Tennessee. Yeah, some pockets of dew points even getting below 60, which would feel great, especially in the morning time there. Would really bring that temperature down to potentially the 60s instead of the 70s that we've been seeing. And that hangs around for a while, but I think by the time we get about 7 to 10 days out, we're probably going to lose it. So again, we got an interesting stretch of weather here. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens here with Ernesto and that trough in the eastern United States. They're probably going to interact one way, shape, or form, but depending on how much they interact is really going to play havoc on that forecast. So again, I appreciate y'all hanging out with me here. Again, if you haven't already subscribed, do so, like the video, and come back tonight for another update on the tropics for Ernesto and the long run as well, going through the end of August and start of September. Alrighty, have a great rest of your evening and your afternoon, and I'll see you all tonight.